morning, and welcome to Talk of the Town on 99.7, 1450 WHTC and WHTC.com.
And we welcome you to Talk of the Town for this Wednesday, October 14th. I'm Gary Stevens. Open line following the 10 and 11 o'clock news. Patty Vandenberg will be joining us in about an hour with what's new around Holland, and we'll talk boating and water safety with Ottawa County Sheriff's Lieutenant Eric Westphair from the Ottawa County Sheriff's Department's Marine Unit. But our first half hour, we're going to be talking about, for the most part, elections and maybe some things dealing with deeds, with the Register of Deeds and the Ottawa County Clerk, Justin Roebuck. He joins us from his offices in Grand Haven and via the Zoom connection. Justin, good morning and welcome back to WHTC.
Morning, Gary. It's good to be with you.
Glad to have you with us, and you can join the conversation with Justin by calling us at 395-1450, 395-1450. We'll begin our conversation with a story from our wire services. With less than 3 weeks before Election Day, Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson says nearly 1 million absentee ballots have been cast. She is expecting more than 3 million statewide to vote absentee this year, and over 2.8 million ballots have been requested. In Ottawa County, Justin Roebuck, what are the numbers for the ballots that have been requested? And can you give a number as to how many have been returned at this point?
Yeah, as of this morning, we are looking at over 86,000 absentee ballots out, and of those 86,000, we've got a little over 36,000 that have been returned. So we're looking at about a 45% rate of return at this point of those 86,000 absentees, and that's a lot of ballots. Obviously, those are historic numbers for voters in Ottawa County and pretty much across the state of Michigan.
So in other words, you really can't compare this to any other election. Not because of the volume, but I think because of the circumstances more than anything else, Justin.
Right. I think, it combines a couple of things, right? We had the passage of Proposal 3 in 2018, and this is really the first big election after Proposal 3 passed, which allows for what we call no reason absentee voting. You don't have to have an excuse anymore. Anybody can apply for a ballot by absentee. And then I think we had, the situation of the pandemic where it was certainly on folks' minds early in this year. And certainly as we look at the numbers in Ottawa County and in Michigan, we're still in an environment where, COVID is very real. And so that's on a lot of voters' minds as well. So I think those two things combined really do make it a banner year for absentee voting.
I will add one other factor. And just a personal observation more than anything else. If you vote early, no, you don't vote often. No, we're not going to play that Chicago game. But if you vote early, you can just ignore all of those political ads on the radio and television and online. Doesn't bother you anymore. You've already done your balloting. Maybe that'll drive people to vote early as well.
Absolutely. I'll tell you what, we've been getting stacks of political mail in our household, at the Roebuck household in Zeeland. And I put my absentee ballot in last week and voted and, was marked off as recorded. My ballot's been received. And my wife has not. She keeps getting the mail, but the mail has stopped coming to me. So that's also an incentive to turn your ballot in.
I thought it was once you're on the list, doesn't matter if you voted early or not,
Well, I think on some of these cases, it depends on how good the political consultants are and how good the marketing folks are in terms of watching that list. And because obviously public information, whoever votes, and not how you vote, of course, but whether or not you've cast your ballot already is public information. And so it's amazing how the micro-targeting works and how, political operatives get better and better at zeroing in on that. So it's great kindling, but if you don't want it, you can also put your absentee ballot in the mail or drop it off in a drop box.
395-1450 if you have a question for Ottawa County Clerk and Register of Deeds, Justin Roebuck. Who handles the information disseminated for who does vote? Does it come out of your office or does it come out of each individual clerk's office?
The answer to that is both. We have access to the statewide voter database. It's called the Qualified Voter File. So do local clerks. So we have access for obviously every voter in Ottawa County. The local clerks would have access for their jurisdiction. And there's certain elements of that list that are public information in terms of, for example, a voter's name and address and the elections that they participate in. That's public information. The other things contained on your voter file, such as your date of birth, your driver's license, your phone number, or email, those things are not public. We're not even, the system doesn't even allow us to produce a report that would give anyone that information. So that's sometimes important because we do ask for a voter's phone number and email on their application for an absentee ballot. And that's really important. We encourage you to put that on there because if there's ever an issue or a problem with your ballot, that gives your local clerk the ability to reach out to the voter right away. So we want that information, but that is not public. So just so voters are aware that only your clerk really has access to that.
And of course, that certainly was a factor in the city of Holland with the 2 millage questions in the Allegan County. They needed to reach out to the voters who actually did the balloting to be able to get those
Yes.
questions taken care of.
That's a great example of that too. Maybe you put your absentee ballot in the mail and you forget to sign it, or the signature does not match. Our clerks are in the process of contacting those voters daily with those kinds of issues. So your email and your phone number on that application is so helpful.
395-1450.
Good morning. You're on the line with Ottawa County Clerk Justin Roebuck.
I have a question for the clerk. As time goes on after the big election and everything, I think absentee is going to be a common thing, isn't it? After this?
Yeah, I would agree. Thanks for that question. I think as we've looked at data, I mean, when Proposal 3 passed in 2018, we started looking right away at, what are other states experiencing that have gone through a similar process? And there's quite a few states that have kind of gone from what you call excuse absentee voting, where you have to have a reason. Maybe you're permanently disabled. Maybe you're over the age of 60. It was the case in Michigan. If you were over the age of 60, you could automatically qualify. So in other states where this has happened, absentee voting has expanded tremendously and has pretty much stayed that way. I think it's a choice that a lot of people like. One of the things that I like about it is the fact that it allows voters to really be more informed. I mean, you have the opportunity to take your ballot home, sit at your kitchen table, Google the candidates, actually do some research, talk to your spouse if you want, or whatever, and cast your ballot kind of on your own timeline. So I like voting in the precinct too. I love the experience of it. We take our kids. I have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. It's like a family affair. And that's great. But I think the option to vote absentee, as you say, is probably going to continue to be a very popular option, regardless of the pandemic.
Okay, to answer your question? Apparently it did. 395-1450, 395-1450. The final frontier for voting. Cyber voting, voting online. How far, in your learned opinion, Justin Roebuck, because we have to say learned because you are an election official, how far are we from having a secure online voting experience that I wouldn't say hack proof because nothing can be hack proof, but do you see perhaps by the end of this decade dealing with not just absentee balloting but online voting as well?
Well, I don't know if I'm just a what do they call those people? A Luddite? I don't know. I read paper newspapers and things like that. So I do tend to lean that way. But to tell you the truth, I don't see that in the coming decade. I really don't. I'm a huge fan of the paper ballot process because we have a verifiable backup that is continuing. I mean, these ballots are counted by machines that are very, very accurate. but we have that consistent paper backup. And, when you see, I always compare the idea of voting digitally to the banking industry, for example. A lot of people say, well, geez, I can do all my banking online. What is what's the holdup with the elections process? I think there's a couple of things there. One, and probably the predominant thing, is the fact that the banking industry has invested billions and billions of dollars, obviously, into all these great technologies that I certainly use. And they also lose a couple $1 billion a year through, the fraud process, where people, unfortunately use these forms of technology to commit fraud, and most are prosecuted and punished for it. We don't have that margin with elections. We're not just going to be able to write off a certain percentage of fraud, right? Like in elections, it's a zero-sum game. We don't have any room for error in that way. And so I think there's a real difference there between, the technology that's used. And when you think about the desire or the potential for foreign interference with our elections process and the doors that opens, and again, you can invest billions and billions into having a secure system, and somebody out there is going to be able to manipulate something. And I think that's why we've held off, and that's why we probably will continue to hold off with the process of online voting. We've got a lot of options for voting right now, but that paper backup is a great resource. And you've actually seen more states since the 2000 election, more states have moved in the direction of the paper process than have gone digital. In fact, right now, there's only 5 states in the country that do not have a verifiable paper backup.
395-1450. Good morning. You're on the line with Ottawa County Clerk Justin Roebuck.
Yeah, hi. Speaking of online voting, that's perfect. I listened to a podcast a couple weeks ago with Michael Steele, the former Republican chair of the chair of the Republican Party, with Susan. I can't say her name. Tsutskaya Sunat. Her name was. She's from the U.S. Vote Foundation, and she was relating how she had lived overseas and did vote online. That there was a secure method to do that, and there was and I think there's quite a few people who do that. So it was very interesting to hear that there actually is a way to do that. And I know the whole thing about banking and losing money and how we don't have, there's not the funds to make that happen. But there are people who do vote online who are U.S. citizens who are international. And it would be interesting to hear how that could be implemented safely, securely, without any fraud. Of course, we don't want that. You want to win honestly. But it was just a very interesting podcast, and I learned so much that I never knew, that it was that there is ways to do it. Secondly, your effort to get Grand Valley students to vote, registered and vote and have a place there, that was fantastic. I am 100% for people voting. Not voting the way I want or voting the way you want, but just getting people to vote and to participate just makes us a better nation overall. So I just commend you for that. Good job, and keep up the good work.
I appreciate the call. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Absolutely. And yeah, that the GVSU partnership has really been great. We're so encouraged to see, yesterday was our first day. It was the opening day essentially for an on-campus location, really the partnership with the Allendale Township Clerk, with our office and with GVSU. And what that really does is help students, register to vote, but they can pick up an absentee ballot there. They can technically fill that ballot out and turn it in to the clerk who is there as a satellite location. And that really helps them on election day as well, because what we've had in the past is, a lot of students, now that we have same-day registration, realize at the last minute on election day that they need to register in order to participate in the election. And sometimes that results in lines and backups, and we're hoping to really alleviate that and just give the students a convenience. I totally agree with you. The more participation we have, the stronger our country is and our community. But yeah, the online voting process is a really good point. There are a number of states who do allow certain forms of online participation for military and overseas voters. We have a process in Michigan where actually under the federal law, we can send a ballot electronically to a military voter or an overseas U.S. citizen who is a voter, but they have to send it back in paper form. So in the state of Michigan, the electronic transmission of the ballot is allowed, but they actually have to sign a document with their own handwriting and their signature. They have to print their voted ballot out on a piece of paper, put that in the mail. So it cuts down on half of the mailing process by sending it electronically, but we still have that other portion. And there's some legislation that's in the works right now for military voters specifically to use their military email accounts to electronically send ballots back. As we know, the military email is a secure channel, much greater security than using just a generic email address coming from another country. So there are ways that we can do that, and we definitely want to have those folks participate.
Justin, let me ask you a frank question. With the expansion, and that's a good way of putting it, the expansion of the absentee rolls, people requesting absentee ballots, how effective has it been in your office and with other local clerks in sort of cleaning up the voter rolls so that absentee ballot applications don't get sent to the wrong people? Because we've gotten calls saying, hey, person's not at this address anymore, and yet I got an application for that. How effective have you been able to clean up those rolls?
Well, that is a really good question, Gary, and that is something that we have prioritized in this year. It's been a major priority for our office to take a look at the voter rolls and clean them up. A couple of things on that. In May, late May and early June, we decided to opt out of the state of Michigan's mailing of absentee applications, and we conducted our own mailing here in Ottawa County. One of the things that we did when we conducted that mailing was we ran the list through the national change of address list at the post office. And if you've done mass mailings, you're probably familiar with that. I've learned a lot about them this year, but basically that is everyone who's connected with the post office to say, I have moved, and updated their address. So we run that list through the post office, and they produce a list of folks who we would not mail to, because unfortunately what happens is voter registration data, what I've been referring to is it's very passive in terms of you're not required to notify your local clerk or the Secretary of State or your county clerk that you've moved and changed your voting address. In fact, the only real way that is done, and thank goodness for this, in the state of Michigan is because it's tied to your driver license file. Most people, when they update their driver's license, that automatically changes their voter registration address. But if you do not have your driver's license, if you have failed to update your driver license, you're not caught in the system. And I will tell you, I don't know a single person, well, other than maybe a few election nerds, who would think after they move to call their local clerk and be like, oh, by the way, I've moved and you need to take me off of your voter rolls. So that's a really big issue, not just here in Ottawa County, not just in the state of Michigan, but nationwide. So one of those things that we did, we literally removed almost 6,000 people from the mailing of absentee applications when we sent those out in June. But the issue we continue to have is that a lot of organizations and third parties send absentee ballot applications. So you're probably very likely still getting absentee ballot applications. Folks who've applied for a ballot already, they're receiving them from third parties. Maybe it's a political party, maybe it's a voter advocacy group. And it is confusing and it's frustrating for voters because, first of all, especially if you've already cast your absentee ballot, it calls into question when you get another application. But voters should know that is not from us. That is not from the county. That is not from your local clerk. We have not sent any absentee ballot applications to any voters other than the one mailing in June of this year. So just keep in mind that other groups have the right to do that. And sometimes they're not using good data to do it. But we are doing our very best to keep that list accurate and maintained well.
And to be honest with you, the best way of doing, the best way to know, that you're going to get an absentee ballot the right way, make sure it comes from the county clerk's office or the township/city clerk's office. If it comes from there, it's reliable. Now, if there's a boo-boo there, then you bring it over and you can deal with the clerks directly on that. It's just
Absolutely.
just an observation on my part. Something
Good
my
advice.
mother-in-law did. She got the absentee ballot, but decided, no, I'm going to vote in person. So
Yeah.
what did my mom-in-law do? She threw out the ballot. Figured I'm going to go there because the other one's already gone away. It's already in the shredder. But is that the best way of doing it, or is there a different way if you decided I'm going to go in person to make a statement before anything else?
Sure. And that is probably the number one question that we've been getting. We get a lot of calls on a daily basis in our office, and local clerks, of course, are getting those calls. That's the number one question right now. I got my absentee ballot, but I actually want to vote in person. How do I do that? And there's a great way to do it. So what you need to do is take your ballot with you, your absentee ballot with you. Leave it in the envelope. You don't need to even open it if you don't want. You don't need to vote it. Take it with you to your precinct, and you will, what we call, surrender that ballot there at the precinct. You literally give it to your precinct workers. They mark it and put it in a special box that goes right back to the local clerks. That ballot does not get used. And then you can vote a normal ballot in the precinct. You can just go ahead and receive a different ballot in the precinct and vote it. If you're in the situation of Gary's mother-in-law, a lot of people are, and that's fine too. There's actually a legal document. It's an affidavit that you would sign that says, I'm no longer in possession of my ballot. Maybe it actually did get lost in the mail and you just didn't receive it. Or maybe the dog ate it. Maybe you put it in the shredder. That's fine. There's a document that you can sign that would allow you to continue to vote a normal ballot in the precinct as well. So either one of those options, the easiest is to bring the actual ballot in. And keep in mind too, that the precinct workers have that data. They're looking at your name on the poll book and they can see that you've been issued an absentee ballot. They can also see if you've returned your absentee ballot. So if you've just been issued the ballot, then they know right away, okay, that's not been marked as returned, and they can process that affidavit document accordingly. So yeah, there's a great question, and one that we get often, and definitely is an option for voters on election day.
More information about the elections. We're going to put a link to the Ottawa County Clerk's webpage when we put the podcast of our conversation on our webpage at WHTC.com. Justin, I know we'll probably be talking with you in the month of November. Probably I'd like to have a chance to chat with you in Morning News on November the 4th, the day after.
Happy to do it. I'll still be awake, Gary. It'll be great.
Well, hopefully I'll have a chance to take a nap. Or anyway,
Yeah.
Justin Roebuck, thank you very much for joining us today. Hope all goes well on the 3rd, and we'll talk on the 4th.
Thanks so much, Gary. Take care.
Thank you very much. That's Justin Roebuck on 99.7 and 1450 WHTC.